Welcome back to State of Decay 2 and the Commune. In the last episode, I went on a quest for materials, and then I was like, you know what, the last thing I'm going to do is, I'm going to clear out my last infestation. And so I did that. I claimed this site to be able to sort of reduce my materials costs, and then wouldn't you know it, there's like 3 more infestations over here. So we've got more jobs to do, which is great. I've actually been, lately, this community actually is probably ready to do their legacy, but I just haven't been feeling ready for it. I've talked about this a little bit before, that I've just been really tired and stressed out lately, and legacies are challenging. There's some of the tougher high-stakes missions in the game. Some of them pit you against humans. I don't actually know. I think I'm doing the Trader Legacy this time. I forgot if the Trader Legacy has enemy humans in it. I think it might. But either way, it's either humans or a lot of zombies, and I'm just not feeling up to it. I like being able to avoid zombies. Oh gosh! Avoiding zombies like that guy. I like being able to avoid zombies when I'm stressed out, so I originally planned for this series to be shorter than it is. I planned to be done with the Legacy by now. Airy Twitch has been asking, when am I going to do the Legacy? What am I going to do for the finale? And, yeah, I haven't really... What am I doing? Okay, good. This is the correct direction. Yeah, so I've just been putting it off. I mean, eventually I am going to tackle the Trader Legacy with this community, and I am going to hopefully win that Legacy and get my last Nightmare boon, and then hopefully I'll remember that my plan is to go on to Heartland after this. That's my plan. But for right now, I'm just treading water because, and I'm sorry, by the way, if these episodes have not been as interesting as some of the previous ones. It's just... things have just been really stressful. It's a combination of, the school year started, a little over a month ago. And it was a little over a month ago. And, that adds a bunch of just new complications and on the family side. And then, I can't really talk about the details about stuff at work, but, I've just been taking on a bunch of new, little sub-projects and stuff like that at the office. Nothing that would be really exciting to you if I explained it to you, but it's just, it's details about the new game. I can't get into it. But, I've been changing the way that I've been working a little bit. And so it's a bunch of new and exciting stuff for me. It's the kind of things that systems designers get excited about. So it's fun, but it's also a lot of work. And so every day I've been excited and happy lately at the office. But I've also been... When I say at the office, by the way, I mean in this office, doing work stuff. I don't know why I call it at the office. It's not like I move locations. I play video games and work in the same exact space. But, whatever. But yeah, anyway. But yeah, so it's interesting because there's some kinds of stress that you can feel, like work stress, where what you are is miserable, where you're just like, I'm doing something I don't want to do. It's really hard or it's really boring. And it makes me sad, and I'm stressed out every day because I'm sad. And that's actually not what I'm having right now. What I'm having is a lot of interesting challenges at work, but they're the kinds of challenges that sort of, they take all of your attention, and solving them and coming up with good solutions and good creative answers is a big deal. And people expect a lot out of it. And so... While it's fun, it's like the reason I do this job. It's the kind of thing that I absolutely love doing. It just takes a lot of energy. And so by the end of the day, when it's time for me to do this stream, or in the middle of the day, wedged between meetings when I'm doing my lunch break streams, sometimes my brain is just so tired. I'm just like, I can't do anything complicated. I just got to do something easy and fun, it's been really great having Vigor, because Vigor is very consistent. It's got fun surprises each time, but I know what to expect from it. And so I've just been playing Vigor a lot, because what I've needed lately is something that is sort of consistently fun, but I don't have to figure out something new every time. And it lets me sort of relax my brain in a fun way, solve some interesting short-term problems that don't matter too much, and frequently die. And that's just the kind of thing that I need. And so my usual let's try out a brand new video game and figure out all of its ins and outs, or let's play a challenging level of State of Decay, a challenging difficulty level in State of Decay 2, and take on all of these challenges and see what it's like for new players and all the stuff that I usually do. I just have not felt up to it lately. But again, it's not because there's something wrong. It's because there's something that's going right. Oh, gosh. Okay. I guess that was sort of fine. Oh, I need to be not firing this in full auto. Okay, who's left? We got 4 zombies left. Oh, seems like it's probably these 4. Okay, not quite. Oh, gosh, what the? That dude's fast. All right. Guy was speed ramping like a ghost. That was crazy. So the Coalition is really hyping up what Halloween is going to be like in Vigor. So I just saw somebody with a the motorcycle helmet, but with a jack-o'-lantern skin on it, and I was like, oh man, is it just going to be full of like people in weird masks? Like, is it going to turn into what's it called? The Purge or something like that? Oh! Nice! Do you see that bloater absolutely take out that screamer? That was great! Okay, we've still got 2 zombies left. Oh, is it? Oh. Is it you? Is it you? Did you just wander off? Yes, that was one of them. This one seems like it started a little far away. No, it's not that one. Got one more zombie to find. Going up here just in case they're on the roof. Sometimes zombies are on the roof. That actually happened a lot more before release than it does after release. Like, we would have entire infestations on the roof. Because, like, you know, games have to figure out when they're spawning a character. They have to figure out where where safe ground is. If you don't have, like, specific spawn points marked out, which, you know, trying to mark out specific spawn points across this entire map and rely exclusively on those would have been a big deal. I think we do have some specific spawn points for if the game can't find a good place to stick a character, but by and large we rely on the game automatically finding places to put people, which means one of the methods you can use is you can have the game just sort of pick a location in 2D space, start in the sky, and drop like a ray down there to find where the ground is, and then stick somebody on the ground. But if you've got 2-story buildings or rooftops on your buildings, sometimes it'll stick people on roofs, and so you have to like mark those areas out, especially to like tell the game, hey, this is a roof. Don't put zombies on the roof. But anything that goes wrong with that would result in entire infestations just being on the roof. Oh, crap! I somehow did not recognize that was a feral. I'm not sure why I didn't. I saw him coming. But for some reason, I was like, oh, normal fast zombie. Nothing to see here. All right, well, let's get it home in time to help with this siege. All right, let's see here. Okay, so La Coalition is not telling me what happens on Halloween in Vigor. He's like, you know what? And I don't want to look it up either, honestly. Like, I want to be surprised by Halloween in Vigor. So I'm glad you're not telling me. I would love for, if it's really cool, I'd love for whatever it is to be a surprise. So, Cogs is suggesting that we should have destructible buildings. That would certainly solve the roof problem. But having, like, that would massively complicate every building. You'll notice that, you know, one of the reasons why State of Decay 2 is frequently, you know, is set primarily in rural areas. Part of it is just thematically we like rural areas for the kind of story we're telling. So that's a big part of it. But another thing that's nice about that, a nice little bit of synergy there, is the fact that it also helps a lot with performance, because each building we build, it's got an interior, it's got a bunch of, you know, it's got a kind of complex place to navigate on the inside, because it's got all the furniture you got to get around, and it's got, you know, a bunch of, like, containers it's got to keep track of. Like, there's a lot going on. That was worth it. There's a lot going on inside of a building, and so the more buildings you have, the more difficult the performance is for the game. And so rural areas are great because the buildings are spaced far apart. So you only have to have a certain number of buildings close to you at any given time. And actually, that's one of the reasons why, like the Heartland map, and therefore the Homecoming map, has got so many buildings that are just completely occupied by plague, is because we couldn't actually do downtown Marshall full of normal buildings because each building is so expensive. Instead, we had to sort of basically turn a lot of the buildings into just big empty husks because we could only afford to have rural distancing between buildings. So if we were to make buildings destructible, that would add another layer of complication on top of the existing complexity of buildings, which means we would have to space them out even further from each other. It would basically have to set the game in Alaska. So if you don't want the game in Alaska, you probably don't want destructible buildings. And yeah, and another problem with urban areas is because we've sort of set this, because we've sort of set this standard in the game that nearly every building can be entered, you know, even the hospital. We at least let you go into the first, you know, couple of floors. The hospital in Drucker. And we like that. We like that, you know, when you're looking at a building from far away, like zooming in with your scope, and you're looking at a building from really far away, you're like, I can go in there. You know, this is a real place. And it really sort of, it lends something to the sort of authenticity of our world, to have all of our buildings be enterable. And one of the problems with like urban areas, people often ask us to do like more than just downtown Marshall, to do like proper urban areas, like a big city. The problem with that is you then have to make, you know, high-rise buildings enterable and explorable, or have them be fake. We don't like the idea of having them be fake. You would have them just be like big shells with nothing inside them except the ground floor or something like that, just because that feels like kind of, it violates that sense of authenticity that we've created in these rural areas. But we also don't want to just, I mean, big high-rise buildings are also dull as crap. Like, I mean, there's some pretty ones on the outside. On the inside, the whole point is that they're full of a lot of identical rooms. Like, that's why you built a high-rise, is because you needed a lot of identical rooms inside them. And so, it just wouldn't be that interesting. Like, an actual high-rise building, the scale of a high-rise building would not be interesting to explore. It would be dull and not fun. And so, even though the idea of sort of like exploring a city, like walking around on the abandoned streets, is interesting, and that's one of the reasons people like The Division, for instance, because you know, being immersed in that environment is really fascinating. I think that just the way that we've sort of set up your expectations in State of Decay, what you get out of playing on a State of Decay map instead of some other game's map, I think a big city would have a lot of problems, and ultimately I think would not actually be as fun and satisfying as people would want it to be. Cog says, Juggernauts are silly. They can't destroy things other than cars. Fences. They can charge right through fences. And, you know, you'll notice that, like, Screamers and Bloaters, for instance, can't. So actually, like, Juggernauts are really good partners for Screamers and Bloaters because they can open doors or open fences that Screamers and Bloaters can't. They're a good big brother to have. So, Laconiskin says, going into Fantasyland, I would love a small city where the downtown is inaccessible, and the survivor has to go through sewers and tunnels and a subway, and the high-rise for them to be, it could be like burned or plague covered. So when we made Daybreak, the second expansion for, not Daybreak, Lifeline, sorry. When we made Lifeline, the second expansion to State of Decay 1, that basically was the theory. A lot of people had been asking, in State of Decay 1, for more of an urban area. And James McMillan, sort of, who is our lead environment artist, took that as a challenge. He's like, he knew all the things I just said to you about why you can't do cities. He knew all of those things intimately from having tried to, you know, get State of Decay 1 up to performance targets. And so he was like, okay, well, we're not doing the obvious thing, but what can I do to make a city? And what he came up with was sort of a beltway structure, where you've got the interior of the city, which is completely inaccessible, and then, but you're actually on the sort of outskirts. You're in the suburbs, following sort of the Yeah, following like a beltway, like a big freeway around to these different, and each exit basically is a little settlement where you can explore, but the interior of the city is inaccessible. And we actually set up this feature called Danger Zones. If you haven't played State of Decay 1, every time we talked about them, by the way, we had to say them in the Archer Kenny Loggins voice. Danger Zone! But every time we oh yeah, that's right. I forgot why I was coming in here. I was coming in here to get a repair kit. We had these places called danger zones, which would basically endlessly spawn an absurd number of zombies. And we basically just, all of the places where the map bordered the interior of the city, or there's one place where we actually made a tunnel where originally James wanted the tunnel to go all the way through the city, so you could just, it would kind of have a figure eight shape almost, not quite, like a LCD clock figure eight shape. So you could cut straight across the city. But it turned out the lighting, there was no way to make the lighting work the way you actually wanted the lighting to work in a setting like that. Just the way our lighting model worked, it couldn't happen. It would look silly. And so instead we also turned the tunnel into danger zone. So you could go part way down the tunnel and then it would stop in a danger zone. But we made the danger zones where basically, they weren't important to the game. Nothing required you to go into the danger zones. It wasn't like, some players would take it to the challenge, see how long they could last in a danger zone, but really it wasn't an important part of the game. The reason we did the danger zone was to explain why you couldn't go into the city. We'd say, okay, you can go a few steps into the city, and then we'll murder you. But we would murder you slowly and carefully with actual zombies, so it would feel justified. Feel like, oh yeah, this is why no one goes into the city, because you will get killed like this. This is what it's like throughout the city. So I think that was a good solution. I think it worked really well. And so, yeah, so I can imagine something like that working again, too, if we decided we wanted to do an urban center. But really, we've just been focused on sort of trying to do what State of Decay does well already, which is these rural settings. So Cox is like, well, why can't we use, like, the cloud to, like, offload some of this processing and stuff? I'm not a technical person. I can't probably give you the most accurate answer to that. He's using Crackdown 3 as an example. You might notice I don't think Crackdown 3 ended up doing all of the things that it said it wanted to do when it was pre-release, because it's hard. And because not everything works exactly the way that people imagine it might. I don't know any details about that. So I'm giving you my rough impression. Somebody who's actually on that team might be able to tell you, actually, we did this and that and the other, and Jeffrey's wrong. I don't know. Oh, I should grab some gas, too. But, do we even have gas? I don't know, we'll find out. But, I think there are certain things where the processing for something could be offloaded. Like, I can imagine, like, for instance, like, if you set off one bomb and destroyed a building, I imagine that some of the physics of that, because it takes time for those physics to play out, if you have a really powerful machine out there somewhere, you could probably ask it, hey, figure out all these physics, and get an answer back in time for them to play out. Maybe I can imagine something like that working, because there's definitely lag when you're doing anything in the cloud. So, again, I'm not a technical person. I don't know how this works. I'm just talking off the top of my head. These are the assumptions that I would make as a designer working with this feature. This is not me revealing knowledge I have of the technical side of this feature. I'm just telling you my assumptions. And sometimes, as a designer, your assumptions about how something will work will be absolutely surprised and flattened. So don't take anything I'm saying extremely seriously. But I've got to imagine that the kind of calculations that we're doing locally in State of Decay 2 have to be local. Like, it just seems like offloading that stuff to the cloud would be, like, there would probably be some really weird complication that makes it difficult for that to play out properly in real time. I don't know what it is, but just as a designer who has run up against technical limitations before, my gut tells me I don't think that would work. But again, a technical person could surprise me and tell me that actually it does work. But that's the kind of thing I would assume would not work. But the biggest problem would actually be the fact that it would require everyone to be online all the time. And one thing that we really tried to do, one of the reasons why we went with, a peer-to-peer multiplayer model with State of Decay 2 was because we didn't want people to be dependent on the cloud in order to play the game. I think there's a lot of situations where for like DRM type reasons you might have to be connected to the internet, and that's whatever outside my control. But we just didn't want if we ever shut the servers down because the game wasn't couldn't pay for it anymore, we wouldn't want the game to suddenly be ruined because we had built the entire game on the idea that we had to have external servers for it to work. And so if you end up playing State of Decay 2, 10 years from now or 20 years from now, because you've got it on good old games or something like that and no one else is playing the game anymore, you can still play the entire game because it doesn't depend on some external server to make stuff work. And so, if we were to make a State of Decay game that was dependent on an external server, there are, cool advantages we could get out of that, but it would be at a trade-off. The game would have a life cycle that is more restrictive than the life cycle of a peer-to-peer game. Nice. Okay, let's get some stamina back. Squish some dudes. Oh, at some point I should probably kill some more freaks in melee. Now, in State of Decay 1, armored zombies actually counted as freaks. And so this, what I'm doing here, killing freaks in melee, would have totally counted if we had had bounties in State of Decay 1 and this had been one of them. But in State of Decay 2, they don't count as freaks. And part of that is just because, in our lore, we really want freaks to to really be a thing. They're not just a category of enemies in game terms. We wanted freaks to actually be a category of things in fiction, which means that they should all be freaks for the same reason. They should all look mutated. Like the bloater has clearly, no one looks like a bloater in real life. The bloater has clearly changed and mutated in some way to become a bloater. The screamer, he's missing his jaw and he's got this weird screechy power that a human does not have. The feral is, able to perceive you despite the fact that he's basically blind. And he's got these unnatural animal-like jumping and running and climbing abilities. Or at least jumping and running. I guess he doesn't really climb, does he? And then, the Juggernaut is larger than any human. And how did he get that big? But the armored zombies are just wearing armor. Like, they were just humans that were wearing armor, and now they're zombies. There's nothing mutated or special about them. If we had given them some kind of carapace, like the heads of the blood ferals, for instance, then the armored zombies would be a freak. But we decided to put them in military outfits instead, so they don't count as freaks. And so, yeah, because we wanted that to be meaningful, not just in game terms, because they are special zombies, and we could have called them freaks if we wanted to, and I think we did in State of Decay 1. But yeah, I think it's better this way, that there's this line between things that mutated and things that are just people. Coalition, not with a exploding belly, you couldn't. Coalition says that he can find people who look like bloaters. Not exactly like bloaters. There's a lot that bloaters can do that no human can do safely. Coalition is asking, how come ferals did not have eyes in the first game? They do have eyes in the second game, but Twain talks about them like they have no eyes. That is a lack of coordination on the team. So basically, this happens all the time on games. You can find examples of this all the time. Game teams are full of people with very different jobs, who all have to do their jobs at the same time in parallel in order to get the game done. And so, because that's how it works, like, I can't be checking in on what the artists are doing every single day. And they can't be checking what I'm doing every single day. We all have really stressful jobs and things we have to accomplish. And so we try to communicate as much as we can, but it is really easy. Wah! It is really easy for something to creep in that you weren't expecting. Like this guy, for instance. It's really easy for something to creep in that you weren't expecting. And so because we were not... so on the, design and writing side, we were talking like the ferals had no eyes, because that's how they were in the first game. And, Doug wasn't reading every stitch of dialogue that we wrote, because that's not his job. He kind of trusted us to manage the writing of the dialogue. Meanwhile, we were not, reviewing every single model that he made, or that every single concept he did, every single model that our character artist made. That's not how it works. We kind of, we figured, we got on the same page initially about vaguely what these guys are going to be. and it was going to work, you know? And so, yeah, it's very, very easy for misunderstandings to creep into that. And so the art team just felt like, yeah, oh, yeah, we've got some room to sort of mess with the way this model works. And yeah, we'll give him, notice he has much smaller eyes than other zombies. So every other zombie has got these big, giant, glowing eyes. It's like their eyes are missing. It's their entire eye socket, basically, is glowing. It's how it looks sometimes. It's not really that, but it kind of feels that way sometimes because they're just so big and bright. And the feral has these big, dark eye sockets and these tiny little pinprick eyes. And so there really is clearly an eye difference between the feral and the other zombies. But they don't literally have no eyes. And that's just like, you know, I think that the art team just felt like we've got this much wiggle room. And the design team, particularly the writing team, felt like we've got this much safety, this many assumptions we can make. And it turns out in that particular case, we got on different pages, and it didn't quite light up. And, you know, you just kind of shrug, you're like, whatever. And so, you know, so what does that mean? Does that mean that well, I think, you know, when working on State of Decay 3 now, you know, we'll have to think, you know, okay, which one of those are we going with? Are we going to say ferals have no eyes? And, you know, whatever the updated feral model is, if we even have ferals in the new game, I'm not making any promises. You know, do we do them with no eyes and sort of like retcon it back to State of Decay 1? Or do we give them eyes again and retcon it in or say, oh yeah, the ferals have changed. Ferals have eyes now or something like that. Like, there's all kinds of different ways we can handle it, and I'm not going to give you any hints about what we're actually going to do. But, you know, and so that means that, you know, games are often just not perfect in ways like that. You know, there's always this weird little rough edges, and even the most, you know, highly produced games sometimes have rough edges like this. And you just kind of like, at some point you got to be like, oh, shrug, whatever, we messed it up. It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. Oh, okay. So, yeah, so the Coalition is actually bringing up other examples of games. Like, apparently, like, Resident Evil 3 had an ending that kind of that assumed that there would be a certain number of vehicles in an airfield, and actually the art team didn't get the message, and so there was just like basically there was a bunch of visuals that were violating sort of the rules of the fight. And yeah, so it looks like you understand, like the this kind of thing, it's really, really easy to make it happen. And so yeah, and when it happens, you're like, you know, you can see it as a sign of like, oh man, we should communicate better, we should coordinate better. And absolutely that's true. But also at the same time, there is always a limit. I mean, there's only so much communication you can do where like it starts to cut into your ability to actually accomplish anything. If it's just endless approval meetings. Like, one thing that could actually like kill momentum in a game is if everyone feels like they have to approve every single thing that happens, and you have to get like 9 people on the same page before you can make a move. When a game works like that, it slows way down, and you start feeling like there's just your team is incapable of accomplishing anything because everything takes so much coordination. You never actually build a game. It's really easy to get into a zone where all you do is talk about the game and you never actually make it. And so you don't want to be that kind of team. And so that means that basically when you decide, yeah, we're going to prioritize accomplishing things on the game over constant over communication and over constant like approvals of things, that means you're accepting at least the risk of mistakes and probably the inevitability of mistakes. But it means you can move fast and get stuff done. And so especially in, you know, Undead Labs, which we tend to have, in general, a smaller team than you would expect to make a game of the scale we make. You know, we usually make a game that has a lot of scope. It's really big open world and lots of things to do. And you would imagine that the game we made would have taken at least twice as many people to make it. One of the ways we've historically done that is by sort of like dividing and conquering, you know, giving people a lot of trust and responsibility and not over-checking everything all the time. And that means that, there, you know, weird mistakes creep in and weird discontinuities creep in, but it means we're able to get more done with fewer people. And I like having, you know, the culture of a team that's got fewer people and where people feel empowered to accomplish things. And so, yeah, so you have to accept those kinds of potential mistakes, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of good that comes out of it, too. Enigmal suggests that in State of Decay 3, Feral should walk upright, wear tuxedos, and speak with a refined British accent, and simply refuse to eat people because they're vegan now. Problem solved. Yeah, I mean, you could always have a time and progress fix anything. That does remind. I've told you all the bear story, right? When I was working on Deer Hunter 2014. What our animator, we called an animator in from another team to sort of help us out animating a bear real quick, and that animator was actually worked faster than we expected him to, and so he added an extra animation, which was a bear walking in with a top hat and a cane. And I tried really hard to persuade people that we should put that in the game, and they never did. So I felt really sad. All right, so I've missed a ton of stuff in the chat. Sorry about that, but this was a fascinating topic, and I just got spun off on it. So Cog says that to him it is a big deal. He actually really does care about the details and the consistency. And I get that. I realize that there are players who care about it more than others. And we do, and it's not like we don't care. It's not like we don't try to be consistent. Whenever, something comes up and we've got options about how to handle it, we do always try to make it consistent and meaningful. It's one of those things where at some point you have to accept the risk of a mistake. And so it's not like you're really deciding, let's make mistakes, let's not care. It's much more like, if we're going to get this done, we have to accept that there's some risks involved. And so sometimes the risks go well and you don't end up with anything major, and that's great. But, that risk is unpredictable. And so, it can always go worse than you hoped it would. Yeah, Coalition, I actually really liked the no eyes. I mean, I'm on Team Design, who was assuming that the Ferals would have no eyes in State of Decay 2. So yeah, I agree with you that Ferals are really scary with no eyes. I mean, those little pinprick eyes they're little and beady. They can be scary in their own way. And so I'm not going to criticize them, because they really, the Feral model we've got certainly is creepy. And you'll notice the Blood Plague Feral, no eyes. It's got a big carapace covering its face. So, I think everyone on the team does like the blind feral as it does have a certain creepiness to it, because you're like, there's an uncanniness to it. You're like, how can he see me? How does he know where I am? That kind of comes with it a little bit. And so I do like what that adds. So yeah, I agree there. Oh yeah, and Coalition has reminded me, like, remember when you used to be able to aim at ferals in State of Decay 1 and they would immediately jump sideways to avoid your aim? Yes, that was also scary. You have to basically aim at them twice in order to actually hit them. All right, I've been playing this game for an hour and 20 minutes now. Completed 2 episodes. That's what I needed, so let's wrap this up with a subscribe button and links to other videos, including the next episode, which is episode 43, I think. That's what's going to go there once I've made it next week.